Welcome into the Atlanta football party. I'm Jarvis Davis. Coming up on today's show, Mecole Hardman find a home again.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in everybody to our Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Georgia Bulldogs talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere else but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me is Jarvis Davis and Brian Gebhardt. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers, you can join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And of course, our Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, we will talk a little bit about the unusual, I say unusual, for Georgia, it's usual embarrassment of riches in one position room. And we'll also talk about big dogs in the big game and a win that Kirby always has when everybody else isn't winning. And that's actually where we are going to start. First off, let's talk about some big things that happened on Sunday. Now, guys, we did our predictions, sort of our X Factor style predictions about who we thought would make a big play or have a big game or have some type of impact. And I think, BG, Brian, if I remember correctly, you might have gone Charlie Woerner. So I do want to actually start with Jarvis in a second about the big, because I think we went both the same with our X Factor and said, hey, it's going to be a good look. Mecole will be the man. He was. But we also had some flashes and some moments, Brian, where we saw good things from both Charlie Woerner and Chris Conley.
Yeah. For me, I actually went Mecole too. As far as
you went Mecole too? That's right. You know what? We were correction.
Hey, Charlie Woerner, just watch out.
It was the backup.
Love, you know what I mean? So, but it was the most excited I was of the whole game because I didn't really, have a team in the fight. I believe we all picked the Chiefs too. So I think we were right on Mecole. Yep. We were on the Chiefs. And I raised my hands up. I was like, Mecole. So he's such a good guy. When I first started covering Georgia and going to the games and doing everything from the media standpoint, he was one of the guys you wanted to talk to. He was one of the guys that would chit chat with you and have fun. So it's cool to see him making the rounds on different shows because he's the one who won the Super Bowl. And then you see the thing afterwards too, where it's like he blacked out a little bit. Right. He wasn't sure if they won because his reaction was sort of delayed. It was almost like a normal touchdown. But for him to get that moment, and especially, because I don't know if everyone knows what happened to him this season. Right. He was with the Jets, and there's actually this kind of now famous clip where he says, we're going to go in and we're going to win the Super Bowl and all this stuff and its prediction, and everything came right. It just wasn't on the Jets and it wasn't with Aaron Rodgers and all that type of stuff. So really, really happy for Mecole and his whole journey. Because the other thing too is that for him, now he's won a couple Super Bowls, but he was really big in that national title game that Georgia lost in overtime. He had some big moments and potentially could have even been the MVP of that game if they wound up winning.
And the one thing about Mecole is that there's so not only just being a guy that you could talk to, BG, in the locker room, but just his story is just very interesting, right? 5-star guy coming out, and then his freshman year he played cornerback, and then they said, you know what, you want to move you to wide receiver because we might be able to do a little something on that side of the football, and that just goes to show how these guys are just always being prepared for the next level, regardless of what their situation is. And I think that for him to be able to come out and be essentially all of the offense that the Kansas City Chiefs had in the first half, and then to catch the game-winning touchdown in OT, it just kind of goes to show you we knew what we were talking about when we were talking about a guy being an X factor, because we know all of the attention was going to be on Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice. He had been balling and picking it up in the playoffs. So when you have a play like that or player like that, essentially sitting down a guy like Kadarius Toney, we already know what his situation was. So, Mecole was stepped right on in. And like he said, he had that rapport with Patrick Mahomes and they were able to get the job done. So just shout out to him just for just being so consistent or persistent. Let me change that. Being persistent, because like you said, you went to all these aspirations with New York and for for trying to win a Super Bowl, and like you said, BG, he was right, but he had the wrong colors. So
that's right.
So it took a while to get there. So it was really cool just to see him out there balling like that. So it was it just goes to show you that. Then I also saw another interesting stat, right? So Georgia and LSU have had a player in the Super Bowl for over 20 years. 20 consecutive years. They've had a player from their team in the Super Bowl, and I think that's going to continue at some point. It's going to continue. It just goes to show you like the type of players that Kirby Smart is pumping into the league.
Yeah, because Chris Conley was making some plays for the 49ers as well. Charlie Woerner had a couple of critical blocks. So you could go all across the board to say just how much of an impact the Dogs had on the game on Sunday. And yeah, I like Mecole Hardman's story because you have to be ready however the number's called. You just kind of never know in this league. And it goes to show if you keep a good rapport, you can go back. Because imagine him being forced to go through the drudgery of what became the Jets season and then watch the Chiefs march right back into a Super Bowl win. And you could have been there. Instead, you get back to the Chiefs. You become an integral part. You essentially win the game because you're right there. You know exactly where to be. And you're actually there, regardless of whether it took you a few seconds to realize, oh my, did we just win this thing? Which was hilarious because that was kind of the whole thing with that whole weird overtime piece. It was like, everybody, like even, watching it, I saw by Jarvis's and I watched it with his family and friends. And, we were upstairs and everybody, I know the rest of the crew had like left. All the ladies were like, yeah, we're going. Have a good night because the kids got to get to school in the morning. Mm-hmm. But I was still there and I'm like reading specifically through like this whole new overtime rule thing, making sure that I understand. And all I could think of was do not let Patrick Mahomes and company get back on that field because I said, if they do, I didn't think they were because I was like, Jarvis, 49ers going to win this darn game. But then as I was going home and listening to the play-by-play, I was like, well, Patrick Mahomes has the ball back and they're just smart enough not to give it to Travis Kelce every single time. And I was like, and something in me was like, well, Mecole, what? And there it was. So no, beautiful thing. And it also goes to show that Jarvis's stat about 20 plus years of having a Georgia player in the Super Bowl is a perfect segue into what you said, Brian, which is that Kirby stays winning and stays recruiting even when he's not recruiting. Because that is your ultimate recruiting. That's a commercial that can't be beat.
Yeah, and Mecole was part of that first recruiting class for him. It was one of his first really, really big gets. Yes. And everything that he preaches about teamwork and being involved, and like I know Jarvis over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about guys like contributing on special teams and doing all of that. Yes. Everything that he preaches came to fruition with Mecole Hardman. You don't know when your number is going to be called. You don't know when it's going to happen. You don't know when that rep is going to count. And then all of a sudden, it's the biggest moment in the biggest game, and Mecole gets a touchdown.
Ready for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And now Kirby can look up and go, look at what happened there. And not to mention Malik Herring as well, getting a ring too, along with, and then Charlie Woerner and those guys that were involved. And it's like, listen, you can still make a big impact and have a long career in this league. And a guy that you mentioned his name, now he wasn't under the Kirby Smart era, but Chris Conley, prior in the Rick era too. Exactly. And he's really made he's in like his 9th year in the league.
Exactly.
He's a role player guy, and he makes a massive tackle on special teams. So it's one of those just take notes for everybody. And it's something he's going to be able to preach to in the offseason. See, if you can get it, you never know what's going to happen. You don't have to be drafted in the first round. You don't have to be this wide receiver 1 type. So really, really cool moment for Mecole. I was super pumped for him.
Yeah, and it might have been one of those low-key moments as well where you look at somebody like a Lab McConkey or the guys who are coming up in this current draft who may not be at the top of the first round or even Marcus, exactly. Yeah. And you're like, look, man, it could happen for you and for me. And of course, I'm just sidebarring, but kind of co-signing on that. That's why I was so excited. Probably the largest scream I let out Sunday night was for Marquez Valdez-Scantling because I used to cover him when he played for South Florida. Point being, you can be deep in a draft and just make sure that you're ready whenever that time comes. But I feel like with Kirby, he really always has all of his guys constantly ready, no matter what.
The MVS thing, did you guys, when he was getting the ball, did it not look like he was going to drop the ball? I had that moment.
I got nervous. I was like, oh,
always catch the spectacular and drop the basic one. And he had like PTSD and like flashes go through his brain. It looked like.
No question.
As that thing was coming in, he's like cradled it. It was like kind of weird how he caught it, but I mean, good for him. He hung on to the ball. It's very important. But I almost like felt bad. He seemed like he got so tight there for a second. It's like, you don't want to think at all. Just
your
hands out there and grab that thing.
Grab it. So but that was him in college. College. He literally was like the big catch kind of guy. You could throw it up and just somehow MVS was going to make it available. That's just kind of what he did. But yeah, it was exciting. I think even if you didn't have a horse in the race necessarily for the Chiefs or the 49ers, because we knew for this show and just here in the state of Georgia, we're kind of looking at those dogs and seeing how they're able to continue to elevate and just be an example of exactly why you come here to play ball, because no matter how it looks on the next level, you're going to be able to, you probably will have an opportunity to get there if you do what you're supposed to do. And of course, if your body and everything else, all of the ducks are in a row. So we'll talk more about some really good things that happened over the weekend and some intriguing things that based on things that have gone on around college football for the last month that not necessarily were about Georgia, but were about Georgia. We'll talk about it when we come back and go between the hedges. This episode of the Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by FanDuel. So we are now on the other side of the Super Bowl and kind of on the other side of pro football, but that does not mean that there aren't still some opportunities for you to bet and make a little bit of money with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Be on all your favorites, or bet rather, and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Again, quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. And as you guys know, this is coming up All-Star Weekend. You've got all sorts of cool opportunities there. You've got the East playing the West. You've got skills challenges. You can make some quick bets and make a cool dollar off of All-Star break this weekend. So check out FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. What do you got to lose? FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. So guys, you know what time it is. We'll talk about it in a minute. It's rankings time. It's over under time. It's everybody trying to project what's going to happen in the upcoming 2024 college football season. But of course, we're always kind of paying attention to things that are happening in between with player movement. And one that was kind of a surprise, but a very good surprise for Georgia this past couple days was former Stanford star Yurosek, one of the top tight ends in the portal, committed to Georgia. Now, he caught 108 balls for 1,342 yards while starting the past 3 years at Stanford, including leading the Cardinal back in 2021. Jarvis, how important was this get to an already pretty talented Dogs tight end room? And Jarvis, I believe we want to hear from you. So hit us with the unmute.
Yes, sorry about that. Can you? I think one of the things that it did, it solidified the tight end room, because when you look at what they already had, right? You got some young guys and Lucky and Oscar Delp. I feel he's going to be the lead guy this year. Yeah. He stepped in last year when Brock Bowers was injured, so we thought he filled in kind of nicely. I almost kind of looked exactly like him. We are the build, and from a height, weight standpoint, it's kind of weird almost. You know, those guys came.
Kirby has a type.
Right. Is that Kirby definitely has a type when it comes to tight end. So yeah, for him to be brought in and like being the top tight end in the portal, like you mentioned, it basically says that young man understands that, hey, he's going to get better. Like, yes. I know he has some nice numbers. He's going to get better when he comes here, because you know, we understand how they put out complete tight ends. Yes. Not necessarily guys who just catch passes. Like, I'm sure Yurosek is going to get a good dose of like, hey man, you can block too. That builds your value when you go to the next level. And I think we're going to see some nice 12 personnel, which we know what, you know, Todd Monken made very famous here, you know, and down in Athens. Not here. I'm out in Conyers. Not in Athens. but
almost, but okay.
Hey, tease. Calm down.
Couldn't help myself. Yes, man.
I know. I gave you a layup and you took it. It's all good. But I think the main thing though is that he decided to come to a good spot for him. Like we talked about earlier. Hey, if you want to go to the league, Georgia is the place for you, because they're going to help you get there. based off of your talents. And I think that Yurosek is going to be a guy. He's a good addition to this room because it's going to solidify it going forward.
And Brian, there is nothing better than to get you to the point of excellence than competition. I mean, when we look at someone, like you said, Jarvis, Oscar Delp probably got exponentially better, and you'll see the fruit of the labor this year just by being in that same room with Brock Bowers. So all of that great talent in there pushing each other in a space where you also know that the tight end room is as vaunted as the receiver room. You go to some programs and it's kind of like an after fact, not that Yusuf is coming from that. Obviously, his numbers would dictate otherwise. But I think that matters too, the fact that you're stepping into a room that's already very, very good, and you guys can probably push each other to be great.
Yeah, and this guy too, he's a grown-up, A lot of times we talk about having grown-ups on your team, and he's going to come in and sort of be, while he won't be the veteran in the locker room necessarily for Georgia and what they want to do. I mean, he's had the most reps of anybody. He's been around the longest in college football. So the rest of that tight end group could probably learn from him. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if this winds up being a tighter 1A, 1B with him and Oscar Delp than people realize. I wouldn't be shocked if, you come out of this Clemson game week 1, because that'll be one of the higher profile national games right off the bat. And Ben winds up, he gets 6 for, 65 and a touchdown. Everyone goes, who is this dude? And it's like, well, yeah, we know we haven't been watching Stanford football too much, but he just came over here and this is what's going on with him now. So I could see him really, really taking off. And especially we're filling Brock Bowers' shoes. We're filling Ladd McConkey's shoes.
Yeah.
These playmaking opportunities are open and available. And, this team loves to use the tight ends, as Jarvis mentioned a minute ago.
Indeed. Now, guys, it's amazing to think time flies so fast, and we're already a month and a half out from the national championship game, right? But so much has happened in that month and a half. Jim Harbaugh left for the NFL. Ohio State hired a couple of OCs. Nick Saban surprised us with a retirement that had a trickle-down effect that saw 8 coaching moves for 5 FBS schools hiring new head coaches. Just actually been a crazy start to 2024 for college football, right? So that made our friends over at ESPN decide, hey, we're just going to throw out another way too early poll, kind of update their poll, if you will. And of course, they still had Georgia at the top of the ranking. No shock there. But I think that maybe what more was interesting was some of the teams that changed rankings that they'll take on this year. And I wanted to get you guys' takes on whether or not you think it makes it tougher, because I think when everyone initially saw the Georgia schedule for 2024, Jarvis, it was gauntlet style, oh my, they've got to run a serious gauntlet. But then I think because of those moves in the last month and a half in college football, there's kind of been a little bit of thought yeah, some of these teams may still be vaunted, but some of them were kind of resetting. So you've got, for example, August 31st, you've got Clemson, like you just mentioned, Brian. They're still at number 19. Kentucky was unranked. Now they're up to 23. Bama, they actually fell from 10 to 4 for obvious reasons. Texas fell from 4 to 2. Ole Miss from 6 to and moved up. They're now number 6. They were number 7, and Tennessee moved up from 16 to 16 from 17. So again, my question, Jarvis, is do you think the change in rankings kind of changes your mind about how difficult this Dog schedule will be this fall? Or does this make you think, oh, maybe it's a little bit of an easier one than we thought?
I think that it's a little easier because of when you have a legend like Nick Saban leaving, and then when you have to go on the road to Tuscaloosa and play in a regular season game, which you haven't done it quite in a little while, I think that makes a difference. I don't think that Caleb DeBoer is going to be able to, hey, man, I can match wits with Kirby Smart because he used to be the guy I used to tutor or mentor, you know what I'm saying, from a coaching standpoint, because we all understand what Kirby Smart's and Nick Saban's relationship was and is, even though those guys have a lot of mutual respect for each other.
Right.
And, I know Kirby credits him to, being a guy that, gave him his start, hey, I'm going to Miami. Hey, come on with me, Kirby. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to Alabama. Let's go win some national championships. So I think from that standpoint, yeah, I think that Alabama game might be a little bit easier. Now they still have a little talent there. I know they, lost a few folks, but we already know the cupboard is still there, in Alabama. So, but I think that that's probably the only one that I see that really jumps off to me that it may be, hey, this might not be as hard as we thought it was.
Yeah, for me, I love the idea of playing a team like Clemson week 1 because it just has that build up to the season where you have something to circle and something to chase and something to go after. And I don't know what to expect from Clemson. Like
that's the interesting part, right?
Because everyone's writing them off completely. And I'm not the biggest Dabo fan in the world, but I don't think they're going to be as bad as they were last year. Like he's not going to let them drop off like in that manner. So I think they'll be rolling and ready to play, and it'll be nice to have that build up, like Jarvis said a minute ago. And I'm almost at that point where it's like, these are words I'm going to eat in a couple months from now. And I reserve the right to change my mind. But like this Bama game does feel like it gets easier by the day when you're just looking at the schedule and breaking it down. Now, I think the tough part is going to be coming off of a trip to Kentucky, which I think could be a little bit tougher game than people realize.
Yeah, that's the one I kind of had circled.
On the road, I think that's the one where it's like, okay, get through that Kentucky game, get through Bama. And I think the other thing too is that Bama will still be in a spot where they're doing really well. It's the beginning of the season. So I think that game will be pretty high. But I think the marquee game and maybe potentially in the whole conference next year is Georgia at Texas. For a number of different reasons. Them being in the playoff. First time that these two teams are playing as SEC
SEC teams.
The Sugar Bowl matchup a couple years ago, which none of the current players have anything to do with. But there's just so many storylines that go into that. That I think that is the toughest game on the schedule at Texas and not at Bama next year.
Yeah, I would think so as well. And I think that maybe a nice little runner up to that would be that November 9th game at Ole Miss. I think that's going to be very, very intriguing. Yeah, because we still know that Lane Kiffin is trying to cement himself in that conversation that we've been having now for nearly a decade. Kirby Smart, Nick Saban, maybe before that, Mark Richt, Nick Saban, and he wants to be in that mix. And he did kind of acknowledge on some level of a Lane Kiffin acknowledgement last year that, hey, we're not there yet. But you knew he was probably back in the lab 2 seconds later trying to get that team to be in that conversation. So definitely we see that. And then one more thing real quick, guys, over under win totals came out for SEC teams. Georgia's at 10.5 with a very grueling 12-game schedule that we just talked about. Would you guys go over under? And we talked about the marquee game already and the fact that we think Bama may not be as tough, but would you go over under on the 10.5?
I'm going over. I'll go over,
man. Because I'll go over.
Like you got the quarterback. I look at the quarterback coming back, and I'll put Carson back up against Quinn Ewers any day, all day, every day. And I think that with all the guys that they brought in from the transfer portal, solidifying that wide receiver room, I just really feel like, man, Georgia is it, man. Like it's up to them. It's up to them. And we understand, like, if there was a loss on the schedule, it was this past season, they took that L, right? Against the Alabama Crimson Tide. Like, Nick Saban is not there anymore. So I feel like, I'll take the over on that. I'll make that money.
Yeah. It's been a long, long time since someone not named Nick Saban beat Kirby Smart. So until multiple people do it, I've got to take. I mean, you get the one loss because you can't go all the way with them going undefeated. I do think they lose one of these games, one of these away games. The schedule is just too much. I think they get to that 11 win mark. I would lay a little number on it.
Yeah, I would say the same. I think I can go with the 11 because they're just like that. And let's just face it, we will be having a conversation about them being national champions again, if not for all those injuries, if we're just being honest. So if they stay healthy, and like you said, Jarvis, they've added even more talent, maybe not to the level of some of the departures, but we could be surprised in them getting back to a higher level, maybe in certain areas where they weren't as great, meaning last season over the season before on a defensive side, if you will, then we could be having this. We're going to have this conversation again. So yeah, I'm with you guys. Sounds like we got another trifecta of agreement here on Georgia being able to cover. Stick around because we're going to talk more Georgia when we come back. This episode of our Atlanta football party is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy, just like you saw with Mecole Hardman and the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday. And that is also what keeps your ride or die alive. Let me just tell you guys, I have a personal and even more personal story to tell you than I normally do. Driving to work this morning, all of a sudden the check engine light comes on. And if you're like me, that light is like the worst thing ever to see on your dashboard. But then I thought about it. I don't have to worry. eBay Motors has everything that I need to maintain my vehicle, leave it at peak performance. So I called my mobile mechanic and said, hey, looks like we're going to have to change the coils out or change the spark plugs. And we talked about who's going to buy the equipment. That would be me, the parts. And I know exactly where I'm going to get it from. So from superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, and all the things that you need for a tune-up, eBay Motors has got you covered. 122 million parts. You'll absolutely find exactly what you need. And with their guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, if you don't want to burn rubber and not cash like your girl, then you're going to go with eBay Motors. It's easy to turn your car back into an MVP like I plan on turning that SUV back into in a couple days. Eligible items only, of course, with eBay Motors. Exclusions apply, and the guaranteed fit is only available to U.S. customers. So, guys, we talked earlier about the shifts in college football that didn't necessarily have to do specifically with Kirby Smart or with Georgia, but on an ancillary level, yes. And that's Ryan Grubb leaving the offensive coordinator job at Bama at the last possible moment of the reopened transfer portal, only to go to the Seattle Seahawks. And you think about that, ironically, he's a guy who came up through the Georgia rankings, right? But ultimately speaking, it's just been that kind of weird month and a half of the new college football season. And when I say that, meaning post-national championship, where the moves and some of the things that we hear, it's almost on a weekly basis, guys, where we look and we're like, oh my God, that coach. Oh my God, that coach. You actually think Georgia's been super fortunate that they haven't had to have that conversation this offseason. But yeah, the Ryan Grubb move is one of the most recent ones that just kind of raised an eyebrow.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a 30 for 30 on the breakdown. Like what happened at Bama the last 6 weeks? Like when Saban left, how involved was he? Like meeting the fact. I mean, it was within 30 minutes of that transfer portal being closed for kids to be able to move. I mean, you're screwing people over in that situation.
Yeah.
And I think, as somebody that's for Kalen DeBoer, who's someone who's new to the South, and it's all about relationships and all these things, that's going to piss off some parents. That's going to make some high school coaches really mad. So I really think this impacts Bama's recruiting like over the next year. Not saying that they won't get guys, but I think there's a couple places that are going to be really turned off by how this went. So it was, and on top of all that, we had Nick Saban join College Game Day too. So the last, from the time that they lost the playoffs, like what happened from up until now, because it just seems so fascinating. There's so many layers to it.
And that's the thing about it. Like when you think about Kalen DeBoer, like we talk about street cred, right? Because like never coached in the ACC before, and then here you have it, one of your guys just leaving it the last possible minute, and then now the players can't. Your transfer portal doesn't open up until after the spring, so they have to basically be around for an entire semester, or essentially to start practices and kind of see how things go, and then try to make a decision. I mean, some can make an argument that hey, they might be the best for them. But it's just from a just being open about what the situation is, and I think that those kids they deserve that, and a lot of times, and I think college football has felt like they didn't when it comes to the coaches because of it's been so one-sided as far as them from being able to move around freely like they should be able to as professionals. I get it, but I think there is something that I think it says something that when you talk about these coaches kind of waiting around and Chip Kelly leaving a head coaching spot to be the offensive coordinator for Ohio State. It's just weird. Like it's so crazy. He's just been open like, I'm trying to go to the NFL to be a coach. Meanwhile, like, hey, y'all don't go anywhere, for the next guy. It's just so weird. It's just so weird. But hopefully, once we get this NIL Armageddon that we're dealing with right now. So like the Big Ten, the SEC, this little partnership that they form, hopefully they can get this thing figured out and try to get some type of set schedule. Hey, if you're leaving, you got to make a decision about X, Y, Z date, and that's for the coaches, not only for the players.
Because I think, just as important, we talk about head coaches, right, and people following them, but a lot of people are recruited by the coordinator or the position coach or whatever it means. So I could see even more rules being put on top of rules in terms of, okay, so if the head coach leaves, you get an extra 30, but now what happens with the OC or the DC, or do you expand it to a wide receiver coach or a linebacker coach? Because like more often than not, it's just as much or more important for what the position coach is for that player, because that's the one who's coming to mom's house, and unless you're like the 5-star, then you'll have the head coach show up. But of course, outside of that, it's the position coach. So I'm interested to see if there's any rules that come about with this, especially with it being at such a big program like Bama.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And that goes back to what we talked about before, the layers. It's like every time you get to one layer to address with the NIL piece, the transfer portal, and so many other things that are shifting in that college football space or even college sports space overall, then there's another layer to it. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it seems, and I was thinking about what you said, Jarvis, too, like it might actually be in Kalen DeBoer's favor that these guys are already there because he's got like 2 months to retain them or recruit them. As we talk about this whole concept of re-recruitment, he's got 2 months to re-recruit them and make sure that when that portal opens, that window opens again, they're like, thanks, but no thanks. I think I'm going to sit tight. That might be one of the few things that's working in his favor. But yeah, it's just more and more of like another weird layer with this whole Ryan Grubb, another, and like you said, Chip Kelly, another weird layer of as the world turns in college football. Because
and the connection too, right? The connection.
Yeah.
How about this? Mike McDonald used to be a quality control guy and a grad assistant, a GA down in Georgia. So it's just,
the connection.
I actually love it. I love it. It just goes to show you just kind of hope it just opens up your eyes to like the relationship that these guys have. And just with Kirby Smart sleeping on Will Muschamp's floor when he was an assistant at Valdosta State, and I played against them, back in the day. It was just to see where these guys come from and how they start to where they are now. It's just, I love this. Like I said, I know I love pandemonium when it comes to this stuff. But I love how, hey, this is how they started. This is I love like seeing how they, how things came about, and just to see Mike McDonald saying, hey man, let me make Alabama a little bit worse.
Yep.
It's for my guys.
And the thing about it is, in order for you to really, really have change come about, often it's going to be chaotic first. So, I mean, we knew this was going to happen, and this is going to be here for us for a minute. But like you said, sometimes this show likes to be petty. So we're here for all of it.
All of it.
On that note, guys, we appreciate you, as always, for stopping by the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Georgia Bulldogs talk. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And don't forget, we're free and available wherever you download your podcasts. Come back for the Atlanta Sports Party Thursday.